In Mr. Nobody Against Putin, we meet Pavel, a teacher in a small town in Russia. He is an event coordinator. He's not a teacher, he just organizes all of the events throughout the school. And suddenly in January of 2022, Putin announces that there's a special military operation happening in Ukraine. The school teacher Pavel, he's very much against Russia invading Ukraine. He doesn't understand about anything about the war. Most people in his small town are pro-war. There's many demonstrations for the war, and there's many young men who live in a small town who are conscripted and they have to fight for their country. A few months later, Putin announces that there will be a new school curriculum, and every school in Russia has to add extra lessons amongst all the other lessons that they have to do. They have to do pro-war lessons. They have to do singing, and they have to learn about weapons and how to survive in war. In Mr. Nobody Against Putin, we see how Pavel and the other teachers in the school deal with this situation and what happens slowly to this town as the war in Ukraine escalates and goes on and on. Mr. Nobody Against Putin is directed by David Borenstein, and he has directed films such as Dream Empire and Can't Feel Nothing. Mr. Nobody Against Putin is an engaging documentary. It's nice to see a documentary from the other side. We usually see documentaries from Ukraine, but for obvious reasons, we don't see a lot of what's happening in Russia. So it was very interesting to see how the war at the moment is affecting people in Russia. The teacher, Pavel, he's a very likable teacher. He's an interesting narrator and director because he co-directed this film as well, because he shot all the footage and had to secretly send all the footage overseas. After Russia invaded Ukraine, Pavel, he's very much against the war, and one day he sees a post, I think it's on Instagram, about anybody who wants to tell the story, side of the story about what's happening in Russia, and he sends a message to someone on Instagram, and eventually they get back to him, and now he's secretly filming for this documentary, Mr. Nobody Against Putin. So he's secretly filming footage for this documentary. He's risking his life. He can go to jail for a long time just shooting his footage just for this documentary. We see a lot of footage of him at coordinate events at his school. He spends a lot of time with his students. His students really, really love him. He's a former student. He's a former student at that school, so everybody in that town knows who he is. It's a small town. Everybody knows everybody in that town. The town is very famous on the internet for being the most toxic place on the planet. So many YouTube bloggers, they go to that town just to see all the pollution. I think there's like a coal mine, some kind of plant in the town, and it makes the air and the soil and all the grass and everything very toxic. So many YouTubers, they visit that town just to see how really toxic it really is. The teacher Pavel, he's pretty much the only one in the documentary who's openly against the war. Everybody in the film is either pro-war or they're too afraid to say how they really feel. There's one character, I'll call him a character because there's another teacher in the school. He's a history teacher, and he kind of looks like someone from a James Bond, like a villain from a James Bond film. He's very tall and thin, and he's quite a funny character. He's very pro-war. He will do anything that the government tells him to do, and he's very, very unaware of how ridiculous and funny he is. So I won't spoil what happens to him and what he does in the film, but he was very much a highlight of the film. It's very interesting to see how the war in Ukraine is affecting everyday people in Russia. Young men are getting sent away to the war against their will, and it's affecting families. People are dying. People are not coming back home, and their families are just left at their sisters and their wives and their girlfriends and their mothers are just at home, wondering what's happening. Sometimes they get phone calls, sometimes they get WhatsApp messages, sometimes they get letters, and sometimes they don't. So they're just worried sick at home, if their brother or their loved ones are going to come back alive or not. And it's very interesting to see how the war is affecting everyday people in Russia. A lot of people are for the war, and the film, the people in slowly, kind of like getting brainwashed, or as the film goes on. And it was interesting to see how the government is trying to brainwash the children as early as they can, like when they're like 6, 7, 8, and 10 years old. Like the soldiers are visiting the school, they show them how to use the guns and how to use grenades, and they have competitions of how far you can throw a grenade and how you can use a gun, and it's very bizarre and very eye opening. If there's one thing negative thing I could say about the film, it's that the there isn't much to it. The film is only about 85 minutes long, and the film is about Russia invading Ukraine, and then they're trying to introduce a curriculum into the school, and the teacher prevails everyday life. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's not a very deep documentary. It doesn't give a lot of detail, but it's more just 2.5 years in the life of Pavel, the teacher. I give Nobody Against Mr. Putin 3.5 stars out of 5. It's a very engaging, sometimes funny, sometimes sad, very eye-opening look in Russia. We don't get a lot of chance to see what's happening in Russia at the moment, so this was a very interesting look at what's happening right now. So I recommend checking out Mr. Nobody Against Putin. Thanks for watching. What did you think of Nobody Against Mr. Putin? Please comment below what you thought of the film. See you next time. Bye.